The history of Kyiv Porcelain. In 2019, the Kyiv experimental plant of artistic ceramics celebrated its 95th birthday. When founded, it was a tiny workshop with 3 craftsmen. Over decades, the factory turned into a large production, which became the flagship of the Ukrainian porcelain industry. During its time, the plant had many different names. In 1924, Experimental Workshop of Ceramic Paints and Decals. 10 years later, Experimental Ceramic Plant of Ukrfarfor Fayans Trust. In 1939, it became Kyiv Experimental Plant of Artistic Ceramics, the name that has the greatest fame. When the factory gazed into its lifetime sunset, it was called Defa and Kyiv Porcelain, and these times were not glorious at all. 1924 is considered the official year of the factory establishment, although the countdown of the history of faience and porcelain in the Kyiv region began much earlier. Back in 1795, the deposits of suitable for the faience kaolin were discovered on the territory between Vyshgorod and the village of Novi Petrivci. Today this area is known as Mezhigirya. A few years later, by the decree of Emperor Paul I, the Kyiv Mezhigirya faience factory was organized on the site of the closed Spaso-Preobrazhensky monastery for the production of elite faience similar to English one. This is how the first faience factory in the empire was founded, which became a supplier of thin-walled, exquisitely decorated products for the courts of the emperor and the nobility. However, the production turned out to be expensive and unprofitable, especially in the competition with enterprises that manufacture similar products under an English patent. In the late 1870s, production stopped. But the glory of the factory remained in society for a long time. The romantic fascination with its history and the need to train young personnel for the porcelain and faience industry in the newly created land of the Soviets contributed to the opening of the Mezhigirya Art and Ceramic Technical College in the 1920s on the site of the former factory. Soon his pupils were at the origins of the new enterprise. However, due to the remoteness of transport routes, it was decided to organize it in Kyiv. The future factory in the capital began as a self-supporting workshop, officially a laboratory for the production of ceramic paints. Later, a department for the production of decals was added. Until the Second World War, the company was constantly expanding decorative painting and firing of products manufactured at the other Ukrainian factories were already being done here. During the occupation, the newest equipment of the plant was taken away and destroyed. After the war, a new era began in the evolution of Ukrainian porcelain. Products made of porcelain and earthenware have long ceased to be attributes of luxury and have firmly entered everyday life. Of course, production artists produced them according to ideological guidelines. They had to take into account the social and cultural demands of the Soviet people. The period between 1950s and 1980s was the heyday of Kyiv Porcelain. Thanks to the international art and industrial exhibition and fairs, it became known not only in the USSR but also in America and Europe, countries of Asia and African continent. The subjects of the painted porcelain figurines covered fairy tales and literature, Ukrainian national motifs and contemporary themes in all its diversity, from gymnasts, ballerinas and beach girls to jazzmen and space missions. However, just as takeoffs are always followed by landings, so rises are followed by declines. The 1990s became the time of collapse of the porcelain industry in Ukraine. Cheap tableware and souvenirs from Turkey and China poured into the market, and in the 2000s, it turned out that Asian products completely supplanted local products. Porcelain lost its former beauty and sophistication and became faceless, tasteless. In the difficult economic and social conditions of survival, the consumer was not interested in art, and porcelain degenerated into consumer goods, mugs and shaped flasks for alcoholic beverages. Along with the trivial goods of today, the masterpieces of the past seem even more exquisite. Today we see them thanks to enthusiast collectors. You can get acquainted with the rarities here in the Kyiv Porcelain Museum. Have a nice walk.